If you should have ever thought about yourself, why me? Why am I the only one person who is suffering with anxiety or depression or with an eating disorder, then the following video might be very interesting for you. Because I collected the data about the prevalence rates of psychological disorders. And what I found was quite astonishing, because I found if you take, for example, a look at the 12-month prevalence rate, which means how many people during the course of 1 year suffer from any psychological disorder, which includes, for example, depression, of which about 7% were suffering during the course of 1 year. Specific phobia had about 6.4%, social phobia 2.3%, panic disorder 1.8% of the population were suffering from that. Agoraphobia had 2%. Post-traumatic stress disorder had about 2.5%. Eating disorders 2% of the population, and from alcohol abuse suffered about 3.4%. And all that adds up to 47%, which means during the course of 1 year about 47%. No, wait a minute, because then you make a serious calculation error, because some people have several psychological disorders. So for example, some people who are suffering from social phobia also suffer from depression. Some people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder also suffer from alcohol abuse. So the real number, of course, is much smaller, but still the numbers are quite interesting. And it even gets more interesting if you take a look at the lifetime prevalence rates, which means how many people suffered from a psychological disorder if you take a look at their whole life. So for example, about 20% of the population suffer from depression once in their lifetime. So if you don't have an episode of major depression in your life, you are actually quite lucky. But also the other numbers are quite impressive. For example, the probability that you have a specific phobia during your lifetime is at about 10%. Social phobia 7%, panic disorder 4%, agoraphobia 5%, generalized anxiety disorder 4%, post-traumatic stress disorder 8%, and the probability that you suffer from an eating disorder during your lifetime is 3.5%, and alcohol abuse or alcohol dependence is also very widespread, about 13%. And if you add these numbers up, you get the number 135.6%. And you have to keep in mind that in these numbers there are not all psychological disorders, and you also have to keep in mind that there are not only psychological disorders, but there are also physical disorders with which people have to cope. So the next time if you think, oh, why am I the only person who is suffering, you might think about these numbers, and the next time when you see beautiful pictures on Instagram or on Facebook of a holiday from another person, or somebody is posting pictures from his marriage or from his firstborn child, all these pictures, of course, they are great, and I understand that people want to share them, but also keep in mind that people are also suffering, and that's just something they don't share. Sometimes I wish they would, because then we would have more understanding, more empathy, and we would understand, well, it's not everything is so shiny and rainbow-like. No, there are really dark times with which we have to cope, but sometimes these dark times make us more empathic for other people, and sometimes they also can make us stronger. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want, we will see you next time.